Welcome to The Best Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Bradley H. Werrell, and we're here to explore options and potentials to help us grow as individuals and as a community with one another in these difficult times and challenging times. We're exploring all manner of potentials related to the human experience, physical, psychological, medical, spiritual. It's a wonderful opportunity that we now experience in this critical phase of our human evolution. And I welcome you to join us in our podcast, become more aware, and identify with people who are helpful and supportive of you in your efforts as a human being on this planet and elsewhere too. We're going to be meeting people who are doing things that are widely variant from what is so-called normal within our society. In the creative space, within the social space, our common purpose, seeking to generate positive potentials to improve the lives of everyone in our sphere of influence, and to expand that sphere of influence so that we may positively influence others that are not yet engaged directly with us. That's the goal here. We will learn more about each other as we go. I wish you the very best. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Yes, the recording, I have to record this because I have to make sure that there's a public record of this end times malarkey talk, okay? Because it's like, malarkey is commonly misspelled. And I think they, people who write dictionaries did it on purpose, okay? So they spell it, like if you see Biden's stuff, it says M-A-L-A-R-K-E-Y,
no malarkey,
right? No malarkey, yeah. Right? It's like, yeah, that was like a nonsense, right? It means nonsense, roughly, by the old school, like the people that I consider like my grandparents' age, right? They would say that. My parents would say malarkey occasionally because they were collecting it from their parents, right? But it's like malarkey, M-A-L-A-R-K-E-Y. And it's like, yeah, it should be spelled M-A-L-A-R-C-H-Y, malarkey. So leadership by the bad. That's what we're suffering under here. And it's like, that's what they don't want you to think about, which is like, it's not anarchy, it's worse. It's malarkey. And that's what we're suffering from with this nonsense, with this Marxist nonsense. And I'm like, that's probably too political, I'll get in trouble. So I have to back off. No, right? So please introduce us to you for the podcast people.
Absolutely. Yeah, my name's Kiara Bickers. So you know me because of the UC Berkeley event where I was wearing like a Make Bitcoin Great Again hat and then got maced.
Oh, I didn't know it was a Make Bitcoin Great Again hat.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that makes it so much worse.
I was under the impression it made it better.
No, it made it worse because it's like you had a red hat on, so therefore you must be targeted. Like,
yeah.
Oh
yeah, but I work in the Bitcoin space. I just finished writing a book called Bitcoin Clarity. Bitcoin is kind of in the news a lot right now because it's pushing new highs with all the stuff that the Fed is doing. So
how did you get into Bitcoin?
How did I get into Bitcoin? When I was in high school and college, I was just interested in economics. So I had a job over in Stanford. I was working as a server there, and I would listen to what was like, I would listen to economics podcasts. It was like, like Austrian economics back and forth. It was an hour every day. I was listening to these podcasts. The Mises Institute in particular was one that's coming to mind. And I would just indoctrinate myself in economic thinking, Austrian economic thinking. And then I heard about Bitcoin because of Ron Paul, actually. It was sort of like, he wasn't talking about it directly, but it was sort of the same cultural sphere. I started ranting about Bitcoin to anyone who would listen. And then I just ended up working in the space because I taught myself.
What's that mean? What's that mean, working in the space?
So I just would get jobs working at Bitcoin companies.
Okay, so define a Bitcoin company for me just a little bit.
Yeah, so in the industry, probably the most common kind of company is an exchange.
What year was this? What year is this?
2012.
Okay, that's about the beginning of the thing. I mean, it's like, so I became aware of Bitcoin through Freedom's Phoenix, which is you're familiar with them?
A bit.
So they're a news agency out of Phoenix, and me and my business partner we had multiple jobs. So we are doing. Like I say, I'm a country doctor, and we were trying to keep our business floating, and we were making extra money by doing disability physicals around the place. We had like probably 3 more offices than this one that I'm sitting in right now. And one of the offices, he's in there. We had all these servers and stuff, and he goes, we can probably mine Bitcoins, and I'm like, okay. And how much can we make? Well, it's like they were 17 cents each, right? It's like this. I know, right? It's like this. He's like this. I don't know. We probably can make 100 in a month. And I'm like, $17 really doesn't fire my cranks, man.
Yeah. Fire your cranks.
And it's like this. Like,
either.
So it's like so we've been kind of bouncing, and we were mining for a while, and it's just like, but it's like, what a thing to watch, the whole evolution of this crypto.
Oh yeah, like back in those days, you used to be able to just mine with the CPU on your machine. So
that was the plan. But it's like, yeah, we just, and there was no exchanges. There's no exchange, so it's like,
yeah,
okay.
So you're even talking about an earlier time. So yeah, when in the early days there were no exchanges, and you would go to, there was like a website that I would use that you'd go and you'd meet someone in person. And then you'd buy Bitcoin, and then like they'd sell you Bitcoin, and you just exchange cash like at a coffee shop, which is like, it was awesome, actually. I made a lot of friends that way. You'd think it was dangerous, but most of the people that I met were quite nice. Yeah, so the most common company in the industry is an exchange. Then you also have like wallet companies. So you just have to think of like, what is the infrastructure required for Bitcoin? And that's, again, primarily exchanges, sometimes wallets, although those are hard to monetize, so they rarely turn into companies. And the company that I work for now is sort of like this vertically integrated company, which just means they like to do all the Bitcoin things. We do a data feed. We do a secondary blockchain that links into the Bitcoin blockchain. We do a satellite, so you can actually relay blocks over satellite, download the blockchain over satellite, which helps for, again, censorship. So like people in China, if the Great Firewall ever wanted to stop them from like validating payments, they could still do that over a satellite. Nefarious.
I was going to ask you about it, because I'm like, okay, so there's like this undercurrent of they can ban it.
Yeah, they sure could, but what would that actually mean? It would mean that normies wouldn't want anything to do with it, I suppose.
But yeah, so it's like but I don't think they can really ban it.
Well, like if we were to walk it out, let's say Canada does it, right? So if Canada were to ban Bitcoin, they only have a couple, like they have like 3 main exchanges. So let's say those places like stop operating in Canada, they fold. Everyone in the world is still participating. If you're a Canadian citizen, what you would probably do is just go on vacation, or, like have a friend buy it, or you would go back to the whole, buying it in person type thing. It would definitely make it more difficult, but it wouldn't stop access, because just because you don't have an exchange, like that would make it hard to onboard. But if you already have Bitcoin in Canada, they certainly can't take it away. So yeah, I mean, it would be bad in the short term, but I don't think it matters in the long term.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm like looking at it because I have money invested in it, and it's kind of like, well, you hear the people, and it's like, I just can't see it negating the space. I can't see them negating the space.
Yeah, I mean, if the U.S. government did it, I think it would have a little bit more weight for a little longer period of time than Canada. But because most of the traffic for buys and sales and trading is in the U.S., Japan, and I think those are probably the 2 biggest countries. So, the government doesn't like to ban things that it can't actually stop, right? Because then it's just like a mock of like everyone would know that it didn't really work.
We can't be seen to be ineffective while we're being ineffective. So we would rather not act ineffectively.
I think so. And that's just my own belief about how the government would like to act. So that I think instead they would move to do something like regulate more tightly.
No, and I think they're doing it right, which is like, it's just to monetize that or tax the when you cash out. It's like just like any other equity kind of thing.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I mean, they do that. But I think, long term, does Bitcoin compete with the dollar in a way that, is threatening?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't think so. Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet.
It's like
And
that.
I think what a lot of these companies want to do is actually where the government is talking about a digital dollar. I met one of the 2 congressmen who were interested in making that proposal. They wrote a letter to the Federal Reserve, tried to make it bipartisan. And there's I think they're actually moving closer to what cryptocurrency is than further away from it. Now they would do it in a way that's controlled and not decentralized. So kind of what's the point? But
right?
I mean,
It's not going to work. It won't work if it doesn't do the same job. It does something different.
Yeah, it wouldn't be censorship resistant. It wouldn't have any of the interesting properties that we like Bitcoin for. In fact, what they want to do, I believe, is probably get rid of cash.
No, there's no question that seems to be the intentionality here, which is, I don't know. We don't head into all dystopian potentials that are being opened up right before our very eyes for the last several years. And it's like, that's a distressing function, isn't it? Like this goes to this, like there's a interesting economist that I studied for about the same period of time. Since I worked on Ron Paul's campaign, by the way, back in the day.
Oh, well, thank you. That's awesome.
Right? I still have buttons, okay? I'm like, I'm going to save these buttons.
Yeah.
These are going to be valuable, man. They're like Bitcoin. So it's like I lost my train of thought a little bit there. Back in the Ron Paul days, I was studying Martin Armstrong. Okay. You familiar with him?
I'm not.
Oh, I will share this link to you. ArmstrongEconomics.com. I've been watching him for probably that same period of time. I'm going to put it on the chat there. Okay. He makes a blog.
I just Googled him. Yeah.
He does. Yes, he's famous because when he was in high school, he had $1 million in coins and stamps in his pocket when he was in high school. And that was in 1968. Okay. The famous story that I like the most goes like this. He's like, his dad comes home and there's a new car in the driveway. And he's like, whose car is in my driveway? And he goes, that's mine. And he goes, who's going to lend a kid who doesn't have a driver's license the money to buy a car? He goes, I paid cash. What are you doing in the back room there, son? He was trading stamps and coins. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, so his dad wanted to send him to college. He's like, I'm not going to college. He goes, what are you going to do? No, you're going to go to college. So he went to a technical school and studied computers. So computers, hardware and software, they didn't have it distinct. They didn't branch out before that. And so he learned how to build hardware and software. And then he just went to be a trader, and he was trading international. He invented the yen carry trade, if you're familiar with that.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, yeah. But, everybody loved it except the people that wanted him to participate in their conspiracies, these Wall Street boys that were trying to get him to do nefarious things that he wouldn't do. And they got him thrown in jail on contempt because they wanted his computer that he made, an artificial computer program that studies all the cash flows of all the world since the beginning of history. Okay. Wow. No lie. He's like, at one time in Babylon, the price of a door was greater than the price of a house because they burned all the trees. And it's like, and he has it because he'll buy the tablets and then translate them and put them in his computer so he gets the economic information. So it's like, he's worth tracking just because he's like, he writes books. Okay. He writes books, and it's like, I buy them when I can. And it's like, it's stunning. It's just, anyway. I apologize for that diversion.
No, not at all. I'm actually really interested in that. I've been looking at cuneiform tablets myself. I've been looking at stuff that predates the Bible and reading older myth stories just as a hobby of mine, and also trying to find multiple translations and then amalgamate them into a better version.
There you go. I like that. Stuff. I like that. So you've met Garrett Daly, yeah?
I have, yeah.
So I talked to Garrett, and because I studied Hebrew, because I studied what happened to America for 4 years, okay? After my business got scratched on the rocks hard, because it's like the systemic oppression against independent doctors, okay?
Yeah.
So they crushed our business, and it's like, okay, for 4 years, I just sequestered myself and studied what happened to America. Okay, and it ends up I studied Hebrew. Okay, and I'm like, in a billion
years. Go all the way back.
I'm like, in a billion years, I never would have suspected Hebrew would be useful in this pursuit, and it is so useful. It's fascinating. Okay, so it goes like this. I said this. The beginning of my study of Hebrew was like this. It's like, okay, there's 2 bushes in the Bible. There's the bush that caught Abraham's ram and caused Abraham to recognize the good God, right? And then there's the bush that is the burning bush, which is a cell phone that talks to God. And I said, this bush is an important literary symbol. I better, maybe I should spend a little bit of time and think about this for a second, right?
Okay.
What is it? So I said, how do you say it in Hebrew? For some odd reason, which is really why I chose to do that. I did. So it's spelled with these letters, Shin Yod Tov. And you say, shit. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, right? And I'm like this. So I'm like, okay. So I said, translate it back into English, right? And back into English, it means bush, it means thicket, and it also means discourse, which just about knocked me off my chair, right? Because I did not expect that. And it's like, now you understand why it's a cell phone that talks to God, right? Because it is the discourse with the higher power that is, right?
Yes.
And it's like, so that's what started my study of Hebrew. Because it is like, what exactly are we talking about, right? And it's like, I discovered this along this pathway, which is, this has kind of computer and financial elements, right? Which is Hebrew word for as fire, okay? You say it cash. Any questions? It's like this. It's like, it's so clear. That's as fire in the marketplace, right? What goes in the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like that. So that's, anyway, so I got into a very unusual conversation with Garrett, because it's like, wow, he's interested in this ancient stuff too. And it's like, because it is what's really going on here is how the consciousness functions, right? And it's like, that's what's interesting, to resonate properly and then generate the field around you that attracts the things that you want and distracts the things that are not interesting, right?
Completely agree.
No, so it's like this. I'm going to ask you this as a computer and a blockchain person.
I want to hear from you actually how that relates back to the problems in America.
Because this is it. Okay, so this is the conversation I was having with Garrett, which is like, it goes back to Babylonian control systems. Okay, and it goes like this: back in Babylon, there's 2 kinds of people who use magic. Okay, there's magi, who are good magic users, who do good things for good people and prevent bad things from happening to good people. These are the wise men of the nativity story, the magi from the east, right? So they're good guys. Okay, there are also sorcerers, and they have an entirely different job. And their job is to summon demons with the intent of controlling the demons through their superior knowledge of evil, which is like, that's what we're being beset by.
Control demons by their superior.
Okay, right. I have to translate that to modern parlance. Okay, then it's like, goes like this. Demon would, in this context, would be emotional energy in the mob. Okay, so it will be like this. Wear this or you're going to die. You're going to die. And I got this, as bad news as a doctor, right? Says, so the patients will ask me something like this. Some doctor told them, he said, you got to quit smoking or you're going to die. I go, got bad news for you, buddy. It doesn't matter if you smoke or not, you're still going to die. That's doctor humor, right? That's not right. No, it's rude. And he's like, so I should still smoke? I said, I'm not saying that, brother. I don't want you to confuse what I'm saying for what I'm not saying.
I got you. That poor guy.
So the sorcery thing is like that. It's like there's a writer called E. Michael Jones, who's a Catholic writer.
I'm familiar with him. I haven't
You
read any,
are?
but I've watched some of his content. Yeah.
He's controversial because he's such a rigid Catholic. You know what I mean? He's like crystalline, right? His books are worth reading, though. It's like I read 4,000 pages of his works when I was studying, What Happened to America. And I wrote a crazy book myself, but I had to stop because I was learning too fast. Okay. So I'm like, I was like, I can't publish that. It's so ignorant. And so Michael Jones, one of the books that he wrote is truly stunningly good, which is Slaughter of the Cities, 1,000 pages. And it's like this. Here's the basic premise of the book. And, this is the crib note, right? I'm going to write the crib notes because he writes faster than I can read, probably. I'm very impressed by him. So it's like this. In the 40s, the Democrats changed segregation good to segregation bad with the civil rights movement as a mechanism for political control. Okay? And what they did was they made it segregation was allowed in the suburbs and prohibited in the cities by forcible integration.
Right.
And then they created a gradient. So now the whites will fly and then we can make money.
Oh, I see.
Wait, and we get political control.
Right.
So you see, if you're going to create white flight, you might as well make money. So this is what he would call libido dominandi, which is domination by the passions, as opposed to rational thinking.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So this is the sorcerer's job. So one of the stories he tells in Chicago, they're paying the black gang guys to be violent and do bad things so that the whites get more scared and go to the suburbs.
And that gives them control of the area.
And it's like, that's good sorcery right there, right?
I don't know if I define that as good, but it's effective. Maybe that is their definition of it.
That's a good point. Now see where the effective sorcery. Yeah,
that's the better term. That makes more sense to me. That's fascinating.
So it goes to the Babylonian control system, which is you want people to be dominated by their passions if you're going to run the country and not have the people tell you how they wish to be governed. So the democratic system the democracy appears to be ruse by which the passions of the crowd that are engendered by the sorcerers govern everybody. And the people who are on top of the pyramid stay on top of the pyramid.
Are you familiar with the guy Moldbug? I talked to Garrett about this as well.
What's the name?
Moldbug?
No. How do you spell that?
Good question. But it's one word. Yeah, but this guy is actually a very excellent programmer, and he wrote blog posts under that name, and what he calls is like, he calls this like the cathedral, and you have these laws that are technically on the books, which, like people who are thinking logically go, well, this is the law. And then you have like the real law, which tends to have more power than the law in the books, and it's the law that's actually enforced. And that's what he calls the cathedral. And there's like a lot of context for that. But, we're seeing that now certainly with Antifa, right? Because they're violating laws, but then nothing is ever enforced against them. Or as a hobby of mine, my wife and I, we would watch court cases on Zoom after the riots because of COVID.
That's a bizarre form of entertainment, man.
Yeah, tell me about it. And it gets a little repetitive after a while, but it turns out the judges will do everything in their power to get you out on bail. So they'll say, like, can you pay $10? Can you pay $1? Like, this is in Chicago. Okay. So they would basically beg the accused, and they're not criminals yet because they're only accused, right? But they would beg them to just pay a single dollar because then they could justify them getting out on bail. And the guys would they would always just say like, oh, I don't think my mom or my wife or my mom or my baby mama would want to pay that. So like, I guess I'll just stay here, which is another way of saying I don't want the responsibility of being free. So I'd rather just stay in prison.
Yeah. Wow.
Very bizarre stuff. But yeah, I think to touch on what you're saying about Babylon and make the connection, there's definitely a lot of things that are enforced that aren't technically on the books, and that requires sorcery, because you have to convince public opinion, and then those people, because the people who are judges, they're not.
No, this is a different function. I call this occult control mechanisms. Okay.
Yep.
Because it's like that surface, which is you call the law, right?
Yes.
Is not the operating system that is behind it, right?
Correct.
And it's like, so the operating system is occult control mechanisms, because there's other things going on that are not spoken about and are not being talked about properly.
Yes, and you got it exactly, because talking a little bit about the psychology of the people in Antifa is, I grew up in the Bay Area. I know these people. Like, I know, like, I'm certain that I went to high school with some of the people who then went on to become Antifa. And it I don't know if I'm too soft, but I have a deep empathy for them, because I know what the psychology is that they're undergoing, right? They're being taught that they're fighting evil, right? So when they're out in the streets, they have these shields thinking that they're up against the great capitalist enemy, and they're doing good, right? But they don't think they're doing good and like, I'm donating to a
No, I understand you. No, I'm fighting evil.
They're fighting evil, and they're encouraged to do it, right?
Yes.
So when you go a level deeper, it's like also their parents are evil, because their parents are going, well, why are you doing this? This is against the law. And they go, no. It's a rebellion both against society and their parents, and it's good.
I know. So it goes like this, and this is the really heartbreaking part of the whole thing, right? Because you're absolutely certainly correct. And I have a friend another one that won't talk to me, right?
Yep.
So both of these guys were my roommates, actually, in college. So 35 years, and won't talk. I won't talk to the one, because the one, I told him, I said, frankly, I regard you as ideologically possessed, okay?
Right.
And it's like, well, and that's interesting, because it's like, it said it works like this. It's like, so ideological possession is, so you think you're fighting evil, and you're encouraged to believe that you're fighting evil, even though, and that's ideological possession, right? But the issue is the people who are leading you don't believe what you believe, and they are misleading you for their own purposes. You're disposable elements in their game. Does that make sense? So it's like this: you're an animal. You're just a slave, enthralled by an idea.
Correct.
And it's like when I talk about these people, I like they're useful idiots according to Lenin. Okay. They have a use, and it's like, so the interesting function there is like this. So it's like, if we look at societies, like groups of people, and how they make use of their idiots, right? The societies that make the better use of their idiots will perhaps do better than the ones that make poor use of their idiots. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could actually think about that on a lot of different levels, because I think one of the problems, not even on a political level, but in just society in general, is that there's so many men that don't pair bond. Like and this is true for women too, right? There's almost like an instability in society, because frankly, I think a lot of like men aren't getting laid, because marriage is sort of dissolved now. And like, yes, you can match on Tinder and stuff, but you've heard the statistic. It's like 20% of the men get 80% of the women.
No, this will go to this one is an interesting one, which I'm studying a philosopher now that's named Kurt Doolittle. Okay, Propertarian Institute. He's like more politically incorrect than Michael Jones. And like, you gotta take your hat off to that one, man. Like, dude, you're awesome. You are so bad. But he's like this. He's like, how do we arrange the legal system to prevent parasitism?
Well, it's innately
So he's like this. His premise kind of goes like this, and he goes, it has to do with reproductive strategies, right? Male reproductive strategies versus female reproductive strategy. And female reproductive strategy is much more loosey-goosey than male reproductive strategy, because the male wants to make sure that it's his kid, right? Yeah. And the females are like, It's just a kid, man. What? Why are you so sensitive? Right? And it's like, so it's like in a broader sense, I think of it like in our civilization, we have elevated the feminine ad extremum at the expense of the social function, the civilizational function.
Oh, there's a moment in time that really stands out to me where, I don't know if you remember when there were riots going on in Germany, and there was a game that people would talk about in the media called Telerouche, I believe is how it's pronounced, but it was basically there was like a rape game that was happening where there were groups of men, and then the outer group of men would watch.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Watch the crowd. The middle group of men would watch the rape, and then the inner group of men would rape the women. And that was publicized in newspapers. And they
But it was not. It was migrants doing this.
That's the report at the time, right?
That's my understanding, and I have not heard about it since that time.
Neither have I. But at that time, it was a pretty big deal because it happened in multiple cities in Germany. And the news interviewed a guy as it was happening, walking by, and they're like, "Well, aren't you going to do something?" And he goes, "Well, what's in it for me?" Yeah, and and it like hit me in the face. I was like, "You're right. What is in it for him? He's going to get called all kinds of slanderous names by literally everyone in the culture, and probably incur bodily harm."
Yes.
Like totally outnumbered. Yes. And he doesn't even get to come out of it the hero. So again, going back to the Antifa kids, they're told they're fighting evil, and the reverse isn't true, right? If you truly go after something that's clearly wrong, if not directly evil, you don't get to call it that. You don't get to put that label on it. In fact, the label is placed on you.
That's because so this is interesting. So label placement. So this goes back to the it's feminine control mechanisms, okay? Which is slander, libel, slur, and not direct. Okay.
Well, physically weaker.
Because right. But so the men answer is we need to organize our violence better. Our violence happens to be so sadly disorganized, it's not sufficient to do the job anymore. It's like, like so when the mayor says the police just don't do anything while they burn school down or whatever, right? Like, it's the end of civilization is what they're calling for. It's like a
feminine mechanism of labeling the police,
bad,
and it is just too effective. I actually think this is a play as well to potentially get automated policing, like with robots and stuff in the future. Because if you remove the police from these inner cities, say that the police are racist, and they're going to be the first to be like, "Oh, New World Order, like let's bring in the automated drone strikes now." I mean, in China, there's already cameras everywhere that can see where you're walking into.
I'm with you, and that's there is an interesting function there, which is they're talking about. The Turks have been employing drone swarms.
Yep.
That is an AI drone swarms in battlefield conditions. Like, whoa, that's just a different game altogether. And that's like, what's that mean?
Well, the individual it means a lot less in this fight.
That's right. And it's like this, I always was of this opinion after when I watched Star Wars, right? Which is that whoever makes the droid factory has to be bombed. You have to bomb the droid factory because you can't have that. You can't be doing that, man. Sorry, you're a bad person. You don't do that.
I have a friend who used to make drones for the military, and in addition to that, he also made like this laser bong that was anyway. It was like
oh my.
He's a very talented engineer.
Yeah.
But yeah, he would tell me about the different types of drone attacks that are out there. There's drones that are so small that can fly in through the crack of a window, just prick you with a needle, and you're done. So you don't even need a swarm of them, really, although that's more visually impressive and probably more psychologically damaging.
But a swarm will be a metaphor for a group that's not necessarily accumulated in one location, right?
Yeah.
Because it can be a delocalized swarm, right? It's like, whoa. I mean, yeah, there's wow. That's just, next. What?
Yeah, I would prefer that I have my own drone army if I'm up against that. But
that's right. And it's like
drones that we get are not are not up to par.
No, and it's okay. It's like the issue is the kind of like the thing we're at, where the locus we're at this point, like psychosocial developmental is interesting place, because it's like end times, right? And it's like there's like a grab to try to reduce the individual to nothing, right? Essentially just a meat, right? And it's like, okay, and the human, it's like dehumanization of us all, right? And it's like, so it's like, I think it's, it's anti everything that Western civilization was aimed at, right? Like intentionally the opposite.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, like that doesn't sound like something that is going to happen peaceably, at least, right?
Well, another interesting way to look at this is like the kind of standoff that we're having with China. I mean, they don't value the individual much at all. And, if you're going to look at it as like a culture wars, but not an internal culture wars, but like culture wars at like the national level, it seems as if it's going to be really hard to compete with them and their model. And maybe
that's interesting, because it's like the model, the Chinese model. So Doolittle talks about it, right? They're fascists. They're just fascists, and they're doing it well because they're ethnocentric.
Right.
That works better than this diversity nonsense. You don't do good fascism with diversity.
Well, we don't have any unity.
Well, I know. I don't know. I think that we can pull it together. The Americans can pull it together. And I think we will.
We certainly have things going for us. It's just, the capitalism,
but it's like this
where I lose it, because it's like, okay, they don't just have capitalism, but they have like authoritarian capitalism.
It's a fascism. It's just fascism.
Right. Like they have property rights, but like only for the state. So it's like, how does our state as a democratic republic compete with an authoritarian? It's so much harder. It's harder to get things done internal to the country. Like there's no seat of power in the country that moves the country. And we see this with President Trump becoming president, how little power he actually wields as president. That's the larger point that I'm making. It's like,
no, we're in agreement. We're in agreement.
Yeah.
The point is made. It's like, you're right.
It's an advantage for us in a way, because we're decentralized as a hive mind. We have disagreement and
it's like
create more new things.
Western civilization has been parasitized, and Western civilization, absent the United States at this time, is under Marxist control, it appears to me.
Yes.
And it's like, it is debased, okay? It is just debased. And it's like, we'll see how long the Western civilization people, it kind of comes down to this, and it's like, and it's like, I apologize if I appear to be more sexist than I wish to appear to be.
You're fine.
Is that sufficiently, like, I think I'm on base again. Because now I can say
never apologize.
I can say whatever I want, right?
Yeah.
It's like this. I was talking to a Swede, a young fellow, and he's like, he wants to leave Sweden. He's like 22, and he wants to leave Sweden. I said, why do you want to leave Sweden? It's boring. I go, because you can't stand up in Sweden because you might make someone feel bad. Okay. And he's like, oh my. So he's like, it's just boring. And I go, okay. And he told me this, that in Benito Mussolini said the Swedes were a perfect fascist state. I'm like, that's weird. That's interesting, because they move as a block. They just,
yeah.
I go, how long are the Swedish men going to tolerate these migrants doing grenade attacks on the police in Malmo, right? And raping the Swedish women, right? Because eventually they're going to wake up and do something about it. And when they do, it's going to be like one unit. That's it, right? They don't like the what's in it for me. The German guy's not going to do it until we do it.
Right.
Organized, okay?
Yeah.
Because once it's organized, then
you're on the side of good.
So it's because of like what I mean, it's like look. So raping the German women's okay. It's on the plate if you're a foreigner. I mean, honestly, the German men are going to wake up eventually and be German.
We should also say, so we don't sound one-sided, that there is Western culpability in this.
No argument.
That was done in the Middle East.
Not arguing. I'm
just stating it so that we can have some sort of
I agree with that. And the premise that I would make is that the malfeasance that the West did in the Middle East was intentional to drive the migrants into Europe for this very purpose, to kind of swamp.
At some point it became that, yeah.
I think that the people that are running history are kind of like they're amoral, and it's like they're sorcery. They're just doing sorcery. So you mess up the Middle East, so the people go to the other parts of the world, and then you invite them into the other place to swamp out the people that you don't like controlling that place.
Right. Just same thing as the suburbs, as you talked about before. And you know what an individualist would say is like, well, you know, you should have free movement of people. People should make their own decision and not be displaced. Like it would make no sense after Katrina happened to like help all of those people in China, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. But if you're a sorcerer, that makes perfect sense.
It is like this stuff. The people that are the migrants are there's like human trafficking that's occurring here.
Of course.
And it's like, so there's like huge networks in Africa migrating people to Europe. And that because you just don't walk from Congo to France.
One of the things that I working in the Bitcoin space has taught me in terms of adversarial thinking. So, you know, adversarial thinking is really just understanding what your enemies or a malicious actor would attempt to do to you. That's a better way to think of it, right? Someone who does not have your interest, someone whose interest is malaligned with yours. How do you protect against that individual? And, you know, it's clear to me that mostly women, but let's just say all of the media, if there's a possibility of something, they need direct evidence that it is happening. It's like, okay, so you could say our border is porous. Okay. And to me, as an adversarial thinker, I'm like, therefore, people are already coming into the border because it's possible. I don't need evidence. All I need to know is that it's possible, and then I know it's happening.
That's like a electrons will flow there. You know they're flowing there. They're just how it works.
Exactly correct, but on a long enough timeline, it is, right? So, but the way that the media operates is it's always trying to convince us, well, just because it's possible doesn't mean it's happening. And it's the same thing with fraud in the election, right? It's like, it's possible.
Well, it goes like this. It's like the presumption about the media then would be that the media is somehow neutral, and it is not. It's a sorcery function.
Right. And that sorcery is so incorrect because in my mind, in my mind as an adversarial thinker, if it's possible, it's happening.
Whoa. I have to stop you because it's like this. It's like you said that is incorrect. And it's like, it's not right.
Effective.
But it's good sorcery.
It's effective. It's good sorcery. All of that is true.
It's performing as it's supposed to function.
But for the individual who wants to think rationally, and a lot of people do that, like a lot of people pick up the paper.
Yeah, you so shouldn't be watching TV.
I had this really interesting thing happen to me, and maybe, I don't know if this is too much, but I will just say it anyway. I was, let's not give it context. Let's see. So a friend of mine, let's say, was reading the newspaper, and she picks up this newspaper and she just starts spouting off opinions as if they're her opinions. Okay. And the opinion was, so in this paper was an article about how pedophilia is just like being gay. And she picks it up and she like reads it as if it's her own opinion because she's read it now. I like, oh, that's really weird. So that's one, right? I go on the train, I like meet up with another group of people. And again, another person independently starts talking about how pedophilia is just like being gay. And of course, it's not the same. Like, I'm not saying they necessarily read the same article, but there were multiple articles at the exact same time. It was like they all received the download.
Sorcery. It's just sorcery.
And it's
right,
so,
but the beauty of it, Jordan Hall talks about this as pseudo-thinking.
Yes. It's definitely pseudo-thinking.
Well, what's interesting is the person who's doing it thinks they're thinking. Which is, and so I had this conversation with my uncle, Harvard-trained doctor, retired. And I said, what do you think about this? And he says, I have to watch Rachel Maddow to figure that out. And I was appalled, right? Yeah, it just curdles your milk, doesn't it? Right? Like, oh my God, really? I got nothing to say besides that, because it's like, that's what we're conflicted with here. Because it's like this. do masks work? The doctors, as a doctor, I know a doctor lost his license for saying they don't work, essentially in Oregon recently. And it's like, and it goes under the guise of science, which is just science as sorcery, right?
Right.
For the purpose of making the herd stampede in the direction you desire, which is like scary.
Which is actually what made Trump so successful, is that he too is a sorcerer. You know?
It's interesting because it's like the issue is this, and I had to think about this when I told my friend that I thought he was possessed, okay? Because I will claim to be possessed too, but of this different spirit. The spirit that possesses me does not seek to acquire power over others. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's like this. So it's like, I won't say that I'm not possessed of a spirit too, but it's like, but the issue is this, is one that liberates me, but doesn't encourage me to do bad things or cause me to do bad things at someone else's expense, right? And that's the key factor, I think. Which is
I agree with that, but you know, it's a sort of a problem if good people don't want power. And
we're in agreement.
Yeah,
we're in agreement. And it's like the issue is this: is there's a certain element of it, which is that they talk about this in yoga, which is like if you don't go out and stretch regularly to your limits, then your limits will come in and find you. And it's like, that's what's happening, right? And that's what's happening. It's like, so you want to be left alone. It's like, yeah, you will not be left alone because the enemy will come find you in your aloneness, okay? And it's like, okay. So it's like it's necessary that we organize our society in such a manner as to prevent the enemy from doing these predatory activities that are preying upon the innocent and the good people who are not trying to be predatory in their behaviors with one another, so that we can conduct business and engage in our lives and enjoy them, right? And that's kind of how I see it. And it's like, so that's why Doolittle's all right, even though he's politically off, like, just, he's an easy target because he's so offensive. He's not trying to be inoffensive. He's just calling it what he sees. And it's like, okay. So, but he's trying to organize the legal system that allows the courts and the legal structure, which is organized violence, the government's organized violence, is to organize the violence in such a way that protects the people that need to be protected and prevents the people who should be prevented from acting in a malicious fashion inside society from doing it. And that's how I see the game plan is, because how do we work together using our cryptocurrencies or whatever we're doing to achieve our goals, right?
Right. I mean, gosh, it's a whole other topic to talk about cryptocurrency, honestly, because it's so good that Bitcoin exists, but it actually pains me to watch Bitcoin succeed so much, because to me, I take the price of Bitcoin as a measure of the instability in the dominant culture. You know, the dominant culture is like where I live. So,
yeah, I understand. I feel your pain.
all, you know, my closest friends are, you know, Bitcoiners. They're all in the scene. They all hold Bitcoin. You know, we talk about these citadels that will be built in the future. It's all very dystopian. But at the end of the day, if America isn't doing well, like you said, the West isn't doing well. And doing well is such a mild way to put it. Like, it would get much worse than that. But, you know, I'm trying to remain optimistic, at least for my own individual tribe.
That's good. That's right. That's the right way to be. You just have you have to have ultimate faith in the outcome of this contest. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, if you have faith, you're like, it's okay. It will look darker before the dawn. However, I'm pretty confident of that. And that's okay. It's okay. Because it's like, what?
My deeper concern is that the systems that are built are no longer sufficient to achieve their ends, right? Like, if the law is supposed to create order, like, you know, maybe if I were to look historically, I would see, well, the law's never really created perfect order, and maybe that would make me feel better. But it seems as if we're in a time where the law is becoming more and more insufficient to create order, because now you need not only law, you need the sorcery. I mean, you've always needed that.
Right. No, I would argue this. It's not the law that's the problem. It's the people that are the problem. And it's like, the educational system has failed, right? And the legal system is just a reflection of the popular will.
Making a very specific case here, like if we look at what's happening with Trump and the judicial system, the Democrats, and I don't mean to be like, just the Democrats this, but it's true. It's the Democratic majority of people, they all believe that Trump will not be president. So if the judicial system does anything, because I've been following the cases fairly closely, and in all the major states, there were constitutional issues where a judge or basically someone rewrote the rules of the election, but not the legislative branch, right? The legislative branch, for who people went to public school, they're the ones who are supposed to make the laws.
just for those of you who missed civics class,
I went to public school, so I have to read all this stuff again. But it's like, yeah, okay, the legislative branch is supposed to make the laws. So if other people are doing it, that's called not legal, right? So, and there's constitutional issues in all of the states regarding the mail-in ballots, like all of the potentially states that could flip. And the issue is the rates at which they accepted them and all this stuff.
Right.
If the judicial branch does what is constitutional and follows law, which I think they would be inclined to do just based on the majority that the Republicans have there, or the conservatives have. I wouldn't say Republican, it's better to say conservative, because all that means is they're textualists, right? They want to read the text and interpret the text. Yeah.
Shocking.
I would just say is the law. If they actually enforce that, everyone is, half of the country is set up psychologically to view that as a overstep of power, because they misunderstand. We're living in two separate realities. They misunderstand the law.
I agree with the premise. And so it's like this: the scales will fall from our eyes, and it will cause a great deal of turmoil in the psyche behind it.
Oh, absolutely, because Joe Biden has already won. Right, he's already won, and so
I understand.
It would be as if Trump stole the election. They've created a perfect narrative in which both sides think the other side has stolen it.
This is perfect because it's interesting because it's like, okay, there's a symbol that I will. I study alchemy a little bit because I thought it was interesting. So I found this symbol that you will recognize. And I'll show it to you, and then I will just tell you what it means. That symbol.
Okay, yeah.
It means divide and conquer.
Wow.
Okay, so it's like this. So the key function in divide and conquer. So Lenin said it. Lenin's like this: the best way to control the opposition is to lead the opposition. Okay, so it's like this. So the issue in my mind, and what occurs to me is what's happening in Western civilization is a general bankruptcy. Okay. So the most important part of the bankruptcy is the receiver. The liabilities and the assets are combined, and then they fall into the hands of the receiver, who controls the next outgrowth. Okay? And so the receiver in a civilizational bankruptcy that we're facing right now is decided by politics. And whereas politics apparently was under control of one group prior to Trump, I don't believe it's under control of one group at this time. And this is where I differ from my Marxist friend who won't talk to me, my former roommate, because he thinks that it's all oligarchs all the way, and that you have to have a violent revolution.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm like, that's not right, man. You got to have faith in the system, because it's like, if you're going to be a revolutionary, you have to believe that violence is the only solution. It's like, that's guaranteed to have a bad ending, right?
Well, the weaponry is not on our side. You don't want to go up against the state. You want to control the state, because the state just has too many advantages that it would be ridiculous to pick that as your target. It would be ridiculous to go up against that.
We're in agreement. And so it's like this. It's like, I don't know. So that's where we're at. So it's like, this is the trick is, it's quite a conundrum that we find ourselves in here, watching the show unwrap as it rolls out, right?
And it's interesting to me as I'm analyzing the things that I just said. I said they've created a narrative, because we're talking about it as if someone is doing this, but it's also possible that this is sort of just like a synchronicity event. It's possible that people have, using the election as an example, right? As if there was not a single person in control of,
Right.
In a fraudulent election, just everyone on their own, sort of in a decentralized fashion, decided to do everything they could to help, Biden win. And in that case, it wouldn't be a they are creating the narrative. The narrative would have just been a natural occurrence. It's like,
Yes.
it's
No, I have to interject here because I was like this. So I'm talking about Armstrong again, okay?
Yeah.
So Armstrong wrote a book about a year and a quarter ago. And in the book, he's like, there is no one at the helm. There's no one at the helm. There's no conspiracy. It's a rudder. It's a boat without a captain. And it's just randomly doing stuff. And I'm like, okay, this I found profoundly disturbing because I studied for 4 years and I came to the conclusion that there's a vast conspiracy at work here and has been working for some time. And it's like, I studied it closely for the last 120 years in America, okay? And it was at work in England before that. And it's like, okay. And I made the documents to right? But it goes like this. So I'm on the other side of the trade from Armstrong, he had $600 million stolen from him, right? Okay, so it's like, I do not want to be on the wrong side of the trade with that guy. You know what I mean? It's like, so he's on the other side of the trade and I'm like, but I know I'm right, okay? And it's like, so clock forward 6 months, March of this year, he made a new book. And his new book is, there's a conspiracy. And he names names and he's talking about it. And it's like, yes, there's a conspiracy and they are seeking to control everybody and everything forever. In fact, there's a Professor Carol Quigley, historian that worked at Georgetown University. He said this, the international financiers wish to create a feudal system, right? They wished to create a global feudal system. It's like, why would they stop wanting to do that? Right? And it's like, well, this is we're at the end game of this particular pursuit. And it's like, so I don't believe in the organic narrative that's what happened, because this is an intentional function there. It's I see it like this. It's like, and this is going to probably get me in some trouble. So, everybody have a little mercy on the doctor, because it's like this. It's like, I think that the narratives associated with the COVID-19, the Black Lives Matter, and the climate change are designed for this purpose. To foment the emotional response, to accept the feudal order that is to come by these people. That's kind of how I see it panning out.
We'll see if it does pan out that way, but it seems like, anytime there's chaos, everyone always wants to take advantage of the chaos. And you can see the wielding of power that's happening there. It's like, at first when COVID happened, to go against it's a conspiracy thing, nobody thought it was real. Like I was watching doctors on YouTube talking about masks in February. So I bought a freezer, bought some food, never had to go to the grocery store when it was rushed, when lines were out the door. It was a crazy time back in May, June. I was supposed to get married. We had to reschedule our wedding. It was just craziness. But there was at least a 2 to 3 month time period where there was no consensus of how this tragedy was going to be used to get more power, right? Because you could just tell the narrative, they were saying, oh no, this will be fine. And it wasn't just Trump saying that, it was the media. They were laughing at things happening in China. I would go to stores and ask, is anyone here buying stuff for the pandemic? And they'd be like, no big deal, fine. And arguably that was the time when you wanted to wear masks the most, because we knew the least about the issue. And it's now that we know about it, everyone has to wear masks, which there's so many more sensible solutions, right? So to your credit, it's it seems as if things are definitely controlled now, because the most rational thing to do in my mind, and I'm not the doctor, you are, right? But it would be to protect people who have certain conditions, right? I have many friends who are immunocompromised, and I have discussions with them. I'm like, how does it help you if I stay home? And
right.
That fundamental question has never been answered to me. And it's oh, well, the media is saying that because people might live in multi-generational households. I'm like, cool. So then you just expand the statement. People who are elderly or have elderly at home should remain isolated. But what is that? How do you figure that it should be everyone? And then then when you take the hypocrisy of well, why does Walmart and Target get to stay open? And I love shopping at Target. And so, I'm not mad about that. But then why does my friend's small businesses have to close?
I know it's like this. It's like, it's part of the game.
Right. It's just a wielding of the narrative. And you could tell the narrative wasn't planned early on because everyone was just acting kind of dumb. They go, I don't know what's happening, right? There wasn't a clear, this is what you should do.
Yeah, no, so there's a certain crystallization of it. Yeah, there's no question, but that's true. It has, over time, it's crystallized out into the narrative that we now enjoy.
It would be so interesting to study history from this perspective. Like chaos happens and you're trying to watch someone come to the helm.
Right, but the thing. So there's a Soviet KGB officer defected named Yuri Bezmenov, also known as
I've watched his content.
David Schumann, right? And he's got YouTube available for the listeners. But he talks about it's like this: that you make it worse. You make things worse. It doesn't matter how they get worse. You just make things worse, so that when the guy comes with his white horse and shining the flag, and the new leader and the revolution occurs, is when it's worse because you'll accept it.
Yes.
The new order. And that's when the useful idiots get beat up on because they're not useful anymore after we establish the new order because they're only good for destabilization. Yes. And so that's when they get beat up hard because the new
and this
order.
Will happen in a Biden administration. I mean, he's probably gonna have to turn on the left pretty hard to make to get anything done ever. Unless they have a majority in the Senate, in which case that wouldn't be true. That would be the worst case scenario.
I'll give you that. I know, I like this. We'll see what occurs, right?
We'll see.
This is not a bad place to kind of wind it down, I think. Which is the Chinese talk about it as the Chinese curse, right? May you live in interesting times. And I'm like, man, are we doing that? Yeah. And I remember hearing that when I was in my 20s, right? And I'm like, no, I want to live in interesting times. Like, not 20 anymore, okay? Yeah. It's like, this is way too exciting. Thank you very much. I feel for the youth because it is it's such an appallingly difficult moment that we're formulating our lives in at the moment, and it's just tough. It's tough.
It's tough to educate the youth on what is a clear path. There doesn't seem to be one. It's all the systems that my parents educated me on are seemingly out the door. The whole college narrative, the whole, you just get a job and work there for your whole career, that narrative, it greatly diminishes the value of a parent because they can't actually
clueless.
They can't help you. The best case scenario is that a parent teaches you how to be reactive.
No, it's like what the question I started asking myself, because I have kids that are they're just finishing college, and it's like, what do you tell the youth if they'll listen, right?
Yeah.
And it's like it is a tough question because you got to educate them and get them to understand just to be right with people, and you know what I mean, and go forward. It's tough, man.
Interesting.
I so enjoyed talking to you.
You as well. I'm glad we did this. Thanks for having me.
I want to do it again. And it's like, Absolutely. But like this, it's like, we'll figure out some more things that are controversial and difficult to talk about and have a laugh. And that'll be great.
Well, I'm actually doing a podcast with Garrett. Garrett and I have a mutual friend. I don't know. Actually, you know him, John.
Oh yeah, John.
Yeah. So we're going to do some stuff on myth, which would cover the Babylonian times for sure.
Oh
so
yeah.
Maybe we'll just narrow ourselves on a specific topic because when we go too broad,
it's tough. It's wild.
It's tough, but if we just hammer it down, because I think you would have some things to teach me about Hebrew, and because I actually am fairly ignorant about that, so you could help me try and understand that time period better, and thus understand the time we live in.
There's one other thing I want to tell you about this little project I'm working on, which John suggested you would be interested in, which is like this. I want to make a library that's like a spoken words, so audio visual library, digital out of copyright books. So ancient, because I want to make it so look, a family can pay $1 a month and then they can have access to our library, which is competing with the nonsense being generated by Hollywood or something like that. And the myths the stories, the canon. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The real basic stuff of what is it what we're doing. That's what I'm interested in. We'll talk about that next time.
Yeah, we'll talk about myth because I think that's the foundation of how we understand this craziness that we're living in. Well, I appreciate the combo.
It's always wonderful, and I look forward to chatting with you again. You have a great day. Okay.
You too. Have a great one.
Bye-bye.